it's a quantitative way for Meta to kind of tell you how confidently can we match this event, this action on your website to a user on our platform. That's the gist of it. So, it's what data are we passing back to help Meta make those matches, which drives optimization, which obviously helps your ads performance and efficiency and all that kind of stuff. One client referred to it as a mysterious force, which I think is about as specific as we can be. Meta has not produced any like documentation or comms on this, but once we saw it across dozens and dozens of accounts, you're like, okay, this isn't just a one-off. This is a trend. This is a thing where spend dropping, conversion rate dropping, CPA like going up, like negative impact on the ad account. And maybe introducing some upper funnel events just will sort of tweak and shock the system a little bit and go after a different pool and sort of cohort of users on the platform and bring them in. So I think like optimizing for that stuff is definitely worth a test, like optimizing for upper funnel events. So I think in that same light, if you want to optimize for a quiz completion, that's pretty high intent.
And now, let's take a listen to the Scalability School podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Scalability School podcast. Pixel Perfect with Brett Fish from Tag Hero. Brett, so glad to have you on the show. Honestly, friend of the pod, friend in life. Actually, Brett's been on one of my family vacations this year already with me, and got another one coming in December. So that's. We have really gone full circle here. But we're excited to have you on. You and Zach were talking about a whole bunch of stuff with Pixel. And Zach, you want to give the backstory about why you wanted to have Brett on?
Yeah, I mean, TLDR is we were concerned about some just like auditing our Pixel. Essentially, we were starting to have some issues with performance, and we were trying to back into if it could be any errors that we were firing on the Pixel. And then we hired Brett and his company, and they came in and did a bunch of cool shit, and I didn't understand it. So I was like, hey, Brett, can we have a conversation so you can explain this to me like I'm 5? And that conversation was incredible. And I was like, hey, you have to come on the podcast and explain all the cool things, CAPI, EMQ, all these acronyms that get thrown out there that I didn't know what they were, but wanted to know more about them. So that's what the episode's going to be about today.
I was trying to think about like what it compares this to in real life, because I feel like a Pixel is not, the Pixel and Pixel setups is like, you don't realize outside of the basics, right? Like, it's important to have a Pixel setup. Like, you don't realize how bad it is until it breaks. It's kind of like insurance, but that's what I came up with. I don't know if it's a great comparison, but it's like, shit, it broke. I don't have this thing and I don't know what to do to fix it. I'm excited to dig into this. So Brett's gonna tell us why it's important and how to fix it before it breaks.
This episode is brought to you by our friends over at Northbeam, the marketing attribution platform that a lot of us that listen to Scalability School and the hosts of Scalability School, we swear by and use. Northbeam rolled out something brand new that I think is pretty awesome. It's a real unlock, I think, called Clicks plus Deterministic Views. And it's the first ever deterministic view through attribution model. I mean, let's be honest, right? One day Click had us flying a little bit blind. You know the drill, right? Your TikTok or your CTV campaigns are building awareness clearly, driving site traffic and lifting sales across channels, but your attribution dashboard still gives all the credit to Google search because it was last click. It's like tracking who made the final shot in a basketball game, but ignoring the 5 assists, right, that got the ball there. So Clicks plus Deterministic Views flips that. It ties actual impressions, not guesses, but verified impressions to real conversions. We're talking direct integrations with Meta, TikTok, Snap, Pinterest, and even CTV. And Northbeam uses hard identifiers like order IDs and hashed emails to prove that someone saw the ad, didn't click, but later bought. That means you can finally measure the real impact of upper funnel campaigns. And the results are pretty nuts. One brand saw 283% more attributed conversions on TikTok. Another got 175% more attributed revenue than they knew even existed. And, another one drove 159% ROAS lift on Pinterest. So if you're tired of under budgeting awareness because attribution can't keep up, this is your chance to see the real journey and the full journey. So Northbeam Click plus Deterministic Views is live now. Head over to northbeam.io/demo to book a walkthrough and tell them we at Scalability School. So, I mean, first of all, Brett, anybody you want to flame and talk about on the internet? I'm just kidding.
Who do you hate?
Who do we hate this week? Who's driving us bonkers?
I don't think I can lead in with that. You might have to warm up. Warm
No,
up
that's
set,
just
get me
that's just
talking.
that's just to get everybody laughing. We're good. We're all friendly people here. It's all love. Brett, do you want to tell everybody about like how you got into this first, like briefly? Like how did you start doing tracking so that and like what is it that you do now exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, pleasure and a privilege to be on with you guys. Highly respect all three of you on the work side, and then getting to know you all, in real life as people too, has been awesome. So it's a privilege to join you. Yeah, so it's totally accidentally is how I'm like here with Tag Hero. My background was all in traditional marketing, so like I date myself. I'm old. Like my original work in marketing was like old school media buying, print, radio, TV, billboards, all that stuff. And then my career arc kind of coincided with the emergence of digital. So I started buying digital banner ads and stuff like that, and saw the tracking and the potential of like, a billboard, you put up a phone number and you hope someone calls it. With the banner ads, we could see clicks and everything. I'm like, this is amazing. Had the opportunity with some early job roles to spend money and work heavily with early Facebook ads when they were right column classified ads, Power Editor era and days. And so I got to experiment with a lot and work on it. And after I'd done that, career stops a couple times, I know what I'm doing here. I'm pretty good at this, and split off to do my own thing, start my own paid social agency. I was like 8 or 9 years ago. And just a couple of years into the agency, though, we were constantly having issues with the stuff we're about to talk about, like technical tracking, pixels, backend stuff. And, now what, like 7 years ago, 6 years ago, previous era in digital marketing, right? Even less available in resources than there are now. And so I got sick of it. And so I'm like, okay, we're figuring this out. This is not going to be a pain point anymore, because it was hindering our ability to serve our clients. And that was the main thing. And did some networking, brought some people in from outside that had like dev backgrounds and stuff like that, and kind of built it into a core competency of our agency. And then very sort of timing wise, coincidentally, or right around the same time, we got pulled into a program with Meta called their Technical Partners Program. So we were a third party, trained, vetted, and paid by Meta to help their advertisers with all the tracking stuff on the back end. CAPI really wasn't a thing back then at that time, but Pixel, catalog feeds, all that kind of good stuff. So we did that for about 4 or 5 years. And when Meta kind of quickly and unceremoniously ended that program, we had a lot of people coming to us like, do I have to run ads with you to have you fix my tracking? And it was so awkward. It was like a sub bullet point of our agency. And that's when I decided to spin it off and do its own thing as Tag Hero. And that was almost 3 years ago. And then, it's taken off since then, and there's clearly been a need for it. So now I'm fully committed, and 100% of my time's on the Tag Hero side, helping people. So when we talk about all this stuff like pixels, server side event tracking, all the backend conversion tracking for platforms like Meta and Google and TikTok and Snapchat and Pinterest and all the others, heavy Google Tag Manager stuff, all the backend technical conversion tracking stuff that drives these platforms. That's our expertise and what we can help brands and advertisers and agencies with.
Yeah, and you're the chief technical partner of the Foxwell Founders membership, and have helped literally every member probably with an issue because they don't stop these freaking issues.
It's so many
So
things to your
it's
point,
just
though,
it's
real
so
quick on that.
constant.
Yeah, it's like Brad made a great point. Like, no one cares about tracking really until it breaks. It's one of those kind of like given things that you expect to work until it breaks. But when it breaks, what you realize, and I've always been adamant about this, and why I went full in on Tag Hero, is it's such a foundational part of success on these platforms that has to be in place. You can produce the most banger creative that's ever been produced, and if the platform's not getting the right signal off of that, it's not doing it justice. So creative and CRO and offers and all super important to success. But at the end of the day, these are all algorithms, right? Good data in, good output, garbage in, garbage out. So the data and the signals are really critical to success. But people don't really care until it breaks and something goes sideways. And then that's when we usually come in. We'll talk a little bit later about how we're trying to get ahead of that. Brad talked about insurance, but yeah, we help them sort that stuff out when it's not working like they expect. Yeah.
So let's go ahead and just jump right in, right, like out of the gates. Actually, Brad, you had a story you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I have two
before we go
things.
into it?
Brett mentioned things breaking, and literally the last 7 days on Meta has been like literally the entire platform just keeps having perpetual disruptions. I think ad spend for all of our clients stopped for like 2 hours or like an hour at least in the middle of the day today. So fun timing on things breaking.
Super
Completely
great.
unrelated to the Pixel or the Pixel. Things out of our control. I just want to share something that I saw this weekend, or actually heard from a friend. It's like somebody outside the industry, and so that makes it even more compelling. My ears start to perk up when I hear people like interacting with brands in real life, because I spend all my time talking to you two morons in particular, all endearing, of course. And so it's like, okay, you're perpetually in the weeds. You don't really take a step back and zoom out and like see how people interact with stuff. Long story short, sitting next to my friend that I've known for since elementary school at a wedding, and he starts telling me about his sunglasses and whatever. It's like a normal conversation about sunglasses. He's like, "Yeah, I just lose them all the time." So, but I have a pair from Shady Rays, and I really like them. And I'm in their replacement program, so they just replace them for me for free. It's like they're $75 sunglasses, and they replace them for free. And I was like, "Oh, that's cool, like completely for free." And he's like, "Well, no, I pay shipping." And I was like, "Okay, how much do you pay in shipping?" He's like, "Oh, like $15." But like they're $75 sunglasses. Like, okay. These sunglasses probably cost them $2 to make. They probably cost like $7 in shipping. And most of that's like because it has to go into a box. They don't get crushed in the mail because they weigh nothing. They're making margin on the replacement program. But like the way that he worded it to me was he was so gassed up. He's like, I get my sunglasses replaced for free. I don't have to remember it. I don't feel bad about this. And just like his perception of their replacement program was, I get free sunglasses. My perception is they're making
Beautiful.
money.
That's
It's like
marketing.
everybody loses their sunglasses. It's incredible.
I
It's like,
like that the first time you left your house since we've started this podcast, you have a story.
yeah, oh yeah.
So-
Look, I'm going to Vegas this weekend for another wedding. So who else am I going to
Wow.
interrogate about their D2C
who
shopping
knows, yeah.
experiences? So,
Yeah,
anyways, I
isn't
thought that was really fascinating.
That's fascinating. It's good marketing. So, Brett, like, let's just jump in and talk about what does the essential setup look like? Shopify default, does it cover Meta okay? Or does it cover, like, what are the issues with just the default setup?
Yeah. No issues with the default setup is, I think, the main thing. I remember a while back there was kind of this big wave of concerns and questions about Shopify's app and the tracking. And to be fair, the app's, it's had its evolution and changes. It was originally owned by Shopify. I think now it's owned by Meta or vice versa. Like, it actually changed hands of like who is owning and maintaining it. But the long story short is, look, if you're the majority, I'd probably guess, of Shopify brands and stores out there, and you do decent business but nothing crazy, I think the app works great. You get Pixel and Conversion API server side tracking out of it. It passes back all the parameters to match up with your catalogs and all that stuff. So from like a data standpoint, it's pretty solid. Does it squeeze every last single drop out of a potential data connection? No. But it's a free, very quick and easy to set up app. So I think for a lot, we always recommend to go that route wherever possible and wherever it makes sense. One of the things with it is it's designed for out of the box, right? So if you want to do anything custom outside of the typical e-commerce funnel and flow of page view, content, add to cart, purchase, all that stuff, if you want to do something custom, it's not going to do that. It's kind of just intended for out of the box e-commerce, but it does that well. So is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but I don't think you're, at a major disadvantage or it's detrimental if you're using it. I think it works just fine for a lot of brands and takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, because anytime you go outside of something, you start doing custom things, there's more things that can to be considered. But no, I think it's pretty solid. And for a lot of stores, it's totally adequate. If you're at a size and a scale with traffic and volume and revenue and everything where a small incremental lift in your overall kind of data would offset the cost of putting that all in and maintaining it, sure, explore. There are other solutions that are a little more advanced, but like I'd say for the average store and advertiser, it does a really good job.
I want to come back to what you're saying for like when you want to squeeze things a little bit more and like when that starts to make sense. But can we back up one step? Like, okay, so the Shopify setup, I think most people listening to this will understand, but just for the sake of making sure we get everybody, that's literally, you go into Shopify, you go into sales channels, you install Meta, and you just like go through the setup process. You select max data sharing or whatever your settings need to be. And that sets up the pixel on the front end. I'm saying words I might not fully understand. Front end and then back end is conversion API. Is that fair?
Correct. Yeah, it's called the Facebook and Instagram Shopify sales channel app still, but yeah, you go in and in the settings, there's a section for data sharing, and you can connect your business manager and your data set or pixel ID and everything. And I'd recommend setting it to maximum. There's a couple levels, set it to maximum data sharing, and that'll handle, to your point, pixel. It'll handle server side events. And one of the things that we can dive into later, but one of the really important things when you have pixel and server side is that they deduplicate properly, because in an ideal setup from Meta's standpoint, Andrew, we were talking about like what does an ideal setup look like? You're supposed to send a pixel event, which is a front side event, and a server side event for every event. So if I go to Zach's store and I go through and I make a purchase, that purchase event from me should send a pixel and a server side event, but they should both be carrying a unique identifier called an event ID to deduplicate, so it doesn't count as two purchases because I only made one purchase. That's the best practice setup to ensure you're capturing that event. But if you don't deduplicate them, then you have overcounting and overreporting and all sorts of issues. So the app handles all of that for you, which is why I think it's a really good option. So it'll automatically take care of all that. But correct, yeah, Brad, you set it up, connect it, and you're off to the races. You really don't. Actually, Andrew, there was a founders member the other day who was like rebooting their store, and we went through and set it up, and like I think it was like a minute and a half on a call, and he's just like, oh, like that was it. I was like, that's it, buddy, you're all set. So it's really straightforward overall, but yeah, works well.
Nice. Cool. So that covers it for the vast majority of brands, but there's obviously people like Zach who want to crank it up a couple notches. So like, what is there like a threshold for when it starts to make like, okay, so I'm sure there's a couple ways to look at it, like thresholds in revenue, traffic, or however you want to define it. And then there's those like unique scenarios where you're like health and wellness, which I'm sure we'll come back to, or you're doing something custom, like maybe some like quiz stuff or, other stuff that I'm sure we can talk about that too. But any way that you like think about, okay, we need to maybe go a little bit deeper than this. Like how are you looking at it and how are you advising folks on when to do it?
Yeah, there's not really a line, and actually Zach would probably be more equipped to speak to that than I would be, but there's not really a line as I see it. It's just if you get to a point where you're like, we're at a certain level of size and scale, we want to make sure our data is, because some of these tools that aren't the app, the app is designed to do exactly what it does. Some of these solutions out there, Elevar, blot out, edge tag, all like, there's other things, because that's not pure tracking. I mean, it includes tracking, but there's other things that software can do. It can do like user fingerprinting and session stitching and some other things. And what I always tell people is, will you get more purchase events? Not necessarily. That's not what it is. It's not like you're capturing more purchases, but like you might have more user data on those upper funnel events that tells the platform, for prospecting campaigns and things like that, who's hitting your website more effectively and helps it optimize. Like that's what I mean when I say incremental. You're not necessarily going to capture and report more revenue, more purchases and things like that. Those events should still fire and be captured in a more regular setup, but those tools can add additional things from a SaaS standpoint that can enrich your data and squeeze a little more out of it. I always consider that somewhat incremental. So it really comes down to me to what is the cost of that platform cost? With some of them, what's the ongoing like upkeep? Like I can tell you, we audit a lot of tracking of, we signed up for this tool and we don't use it anymore and we're not sure what the aftermath looks like. Like we get a lot of that. So some of them can be technical and require some upkeep that's more than some brands are equipped or willing to do. So you have to kind of consider all that. But if that all makes sense and lines up for what it gives you, then I think it could be worth it to try. But I don't have like a hard, like at this dollar of revenue or at this amount of traffic or events, does it make sense? There's no like hard line on that. It's just kind of, I think, when it starts to make sense for you as a brand to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, the way that I justify it is like, if you're spending a few $100,000 a month on ads, probably should take a look at this, right? And make sure everything's dialed in, right? I think that that's just like the baseline thought on my end. So, yeah, I mean, I think let's get into like some of the other things that you can do. Um, right? So, I remember like one of the questions that we had for you, Brett, was, is there a way for us to see and run pixel events for new customer purchase versus returning customer purchase, because maybe we want to test optimizing off of that to see if we can get focus on new customers, right? Is there some level of event data or something that's happening on the back end that might be able to actually show better performance if we just optimize off of new purchase? Like, tell us more about the other things that we can start to do with like going a step deeper than just the standard setup.
Just to at the high level, yes, you can definitely capture events either through like a platform like an Elevar or a Blotout. Shopify actually has that as part of their core web API. So even if we do something with like Google Tag Manager, we can still determine, was this event from a new customer that's never bought from you before, or is it not a new customer, i.e. a returning customer? And you can fire like a custom meta event, for example. You could even do a custom Google conversion if you wanted, but you can fire those respectively, where you say this is a new customer purchase versus this is a returning customer purchase, and then you could choose to optimize for new customer. That's the technical side. My opinion and soapbox on it is I don't actually know how useful that is. I'm always at like a results talk, right? So if it works and we can repeat that like any other kind of experiment, like great. Like what does my opinion matter? It works, right? But my thing with that has always been there's no metric in Meta system. And I think we talked a little bit about this, Zach, and you mentioned something that you had talked about on a call as like alternate reasoning that I think would be worth like going through. But from the technical side, there isn't a metric in Meta system that says that's new customer. There's no recognition in Meta side like, oh, this is a new customer. So when you're passing a new customer event, you're really just passing a subset of your overall purchase event. And is Meta going to be able to optimize toward that group of users as a new customer and go find other people who have not bought from you before? Not necessarily. So I know some people that have tried optimizing for it and it worked for a little stretch and then maybe kind of, petered off over time. I've never been super sold on the technical back end of it, but it's definitely possible and
Yeah,
something you can try and is worth testing.
for sure. We just wanted to try it, right? Similar thought. It was like, let's just see what happens. No bump in performance. So like, I don't think, and again, that's just one data set to use. It's just us, but
Same, but for us, by the
yeah.
way.
Okay.
So
Got it. Yeah. I
literally
mean,
like this last week.
we tried it. Didn't do anything. I think optimize enough of the main standard purchase event is probably the way to go 99% of the time. Right. So, yeah, I'm glad that you called that out though.
Yeah, that and exclusions, right? I mean, using as robust of exclusions as you can in your ads, I think is probably a better overall approach than just trying to optimize toward an audience of people who it's their first time buying from you. And I could be wrong about that, right? Meta could have something in their infinite data point structure that says like this person interacted with this store for the first time or whatever, but we haven't really seen any proof or evidence of that. So it's all kind of speculation. Honestly, I think it's been a little bit more almost marketing fodder for like data tools to say, oh, we can do this, than it is like real, actual practical execution and like results off of that. But it's like, I've heard for some periods it's worked. So it's definitely worth testing and trying if you want to. And it's definitely something that's available, especially if you're on like Shopify.
This
It's
is
pretty easy to tap into.
This is an ask for House to sponsor the next, I don't know, handful of podcasts and give me House for free, so I can technically trial this out and run it by, the book. But outside of that, yeah, we tried it ourselves. No difference. Should we get into EMQ?
Yeah, so the one I would love to talk about EMQ, and just like really briefly, can I actually let's talk about CAPI first, if you don't mind. You have the default install, and just so I understand what CAPI does, CAPI goes on your site, and if someone is filling out a form or puts in their email to capture it, it tags that together. Is that what CAPI is? Part of what CAPI is? What is CAPI then?
No, it was
Like,
a good
what does it
try.
do?
It was a good try, Foxwell. But no. So what CAPI is it's an alternate route to send your data to Meta than the Pixel. The Pixel we all know and love that's been around forever. So it's an
Right.
alternate route. The Pixel is JavaScript, so it's code that lives on your website and it shoots data directly back to Meta from there. The issue with that is it can be disrupted and blocked by all sorts of things. So like
Right.
browser load errors, slow internet connections, ad blockers, JavaScript blockers. There's a myriad of things that can disrupt that pixel sending that signal back. So CAPI stands for Conversion API. And it's Meta's terminology for server-side tracking, but it's essentially instead of sending it via JavaScript via the pixel to Meta, we're actually going to capture that on our own servers, and then our servers are going to connect to Meta's servers directly with an API and pass them that data.
Right,
So
and
it's
it's
an
capturing
alternate
it's
data
capturing the
stream.
things that they're doing though on the
It's the
site.
same events. It's all the same data and all
Yes.
of the same events that
Okay.
the Pixel sends. Correct.
So that's what I meant. Like it's capturing action not related to the pixel. I didn't say that properly. But it's like if they put in their email or they start filling out a form or they click add to cart, like it's capturing all that information just independently of the pixel.
Yeah, same information, but
Yes.
sending it to Meta a different path
Okay.
that's less likely to get disrupted.
Okay, was thinking about if I was going to ask this on the podcast because it risking looking stupid, but I don't fucking care. So I'm stupid. So I just wanted to make sure. Like
No,
that's what I
it's-
thought, and I want. So that's what CAPI is. Is there anything that people can do to help improve the CAPI experience?
I think one main sort of distinction to make up front is that CAPI is like server-side events. When it comes to emails and stuff like that, that's EMQ, and that's what Zach mentioned that we can definitely dive into in more depth in a minute. When it comes to CAPI, really you just want to make sure you have it implemented. So the numbers kind of move, but Meta's official documentation has always been you get somewhere between 8 to 13% more events by having CAPI in place alongside your Pixel in a redundant setup than just Pixel alone. So CAPI is really valuable in that sense of you would have some signal loss if you just were using the Pixel. Whereas if you have CAPI, I mean, let's say ballpark 9 or 10%, that can be a huge swing as far as like revenue and purchase activity reported and things like that. In regard to making it like I guess as effective as possible, you just want to make sure it's a strong, robust CAPI setup. It's a true redundant setup. So like the Shopify app would take care of that for you if you're using Google Tag Manager or something like that. Just making sure you have a CAPI implementation in place alongside your Pixel that captures all the same events. You should be in good place. CAPI is really a backstop to get any of those events that the Pixel loses or drops or there's signal disruption.
And how would someone
that's its main
know?
value.
How would they know if the pixel, if like the CAPI setup isn't good?
So
like, I mean, let's say I have the default installed and I'm like, I feel like I'm not doing good here. And then I'm like, see an ad for, one of these tracking things. I'm like, should I sign up with it flat out or whatever? Like, where do I look to solve this on my own?
Yep. So the main place you'd want to go where we spend most of our time is in the Meta Events Manager. So if you go into Meta Business Manager, the Events Manager tool and section will show you all the events that are coming into your site. And in that overview on that dashboard, there's a column that says connection method. And if it says multiple, that means you're getting events via both Pixel and CAPI. And you can actually expand any of the individual events. And there's a chart, there's a graph that's actually really useful. And it shows you here's the server events that are coming in, here's the Pixel events that are coming in, and they should be pretty tightly correlated. So if that all is there and is in place, you're probably in good shape. I mean, shameless plug, if you're unsure how to check that, we offer that as, we do meta tracking audits to make sure all that stuff's in place and dialed in. But yeah, that's where you'd want to look to see if you see that multiple, like it's coming in from multiple channels, and you look at that graph and you're getting server and Pixel events pretty consistently, you're probably in good shape. So Meta Events Manager would be where you want to take a look at that.
I have it pulled up right now. I'm looking at it. Does automatic website matching impact like conversion API or EMQ or not really?
No, so EMQ, when we look at it in Meta Events Manager, is actually that's all from CAPI. So if you don't have a CAPI connection, that tab won't even show in Events Manager. Automatic advanced matching, if we distill it down, is really just what you're telling the Pixel. It's a Pixel-based tool. Is any page that the Pixel's installed on that you're saying, go ahead and scan that page and that code. And if you see things that are email addresses, phone numbers, names, name fields, go ahead and pass that data back with the Pixel for match purposes. So you're just giving it some automated leash to identify that information and send it back. And that does help match rates, which we can dive into more, but that's really like how the platform optimizes. So if I go on Zach's store and I make a purchase, Meta needs to match that action up, that purchase on his site up with a user on their platform. So they need to connect that back. And then once they know I'm a user on their platform, then they're like, okay, let's go find other Brett Fishes who, with all of our data points, has similar interests and we think would also be a prospective customer. That's how the Meta optimization engine works for ads. So it's really important that you pass as much of that that match data back as possible to help the platform do that and more efficiently optimize your ads. So it's a pixel based thing, the automatic advanced matching, but we highly recommend having it on and having any of the match keys on unless you have like a strong business reason. Some of them aren't as important, like gender, date of birth, probably not as important, but like name and email and external IDs and things like that are really good to pass if you can.
Yeah, I mean, that's like one of the first things that we check in audits, just as like to make sure it's turned on, and almost always not all of it's turned on. So maybe that's like a low hanging fruit thing that people can do.
The other thing I would tell anybody, I call it the silent killer, and that's probably a little dramatic, but I can't tell you how many audits we find issues with this. There's a section in the settings tab of Events Manager, if you scroll down, that says Event Setup Tool. And Event Setup Tool is a codeless tool that Meta offers. So if your pixel is installed on a site and you really need to get an event tracking on like a button click or a link click, but you don't have access to the code and you can't add events and stuff, you can use this Event Setup Tool, which is a codeless tool from Meta to do that. The problem is what we see with so many advertisers is at some point in the past, too many cooks in the kitchen, summer marketing intern, whatever, has set up events via the Event Setup Tool, and they have a normal regular e-commerce tracking setup in place. So they'll be getting like huge duplication on like add to carts or sometimes purchases and things like that. And if you look in the site code, even you won't see it. It doesn't exist. You can only see it if you're in that event setup tool. So that's always something I recommend people check too, is just like make sure there's no events in there. It serves its purpose, but you can't pass back like dollar values and SKUs or anything else. It's just a pure like event tracking. So that's always one I recommend in the settings too, Brad, that you check on audits because it can cause all kinds of problems.
So probably some intern reading the Foxwell digital blog, full of a lot of goodies on there. Your conversation with Brett about the EMQ and about your own EMQ, what were you trying to solve? And then like, what is it? And what did you know about it? And then what did Brett kind of illuminate for you there?
So I was curious on like, I mean, I had the understanding that event match quality, the better it is, the better, better results you get, right? The more data you can send back to Meta, I would hope that the better performance we get out of our ad account, right? So simply put, that's all I knew, right? What is it actually? And what was my question for Brett was like, what do the numbers mean, right? Is a 9 good? Is a 7 good? I have no idea. It's out of 10. So like, what do these scores actually mean? And when do I need to get worried, right? So one of the things that we were running on one of the brands is that we were having issues, all sorts of issues with our basically pixel tracking. We had health and wellness hit us. A bunch of stuff started to happen. That was all accidental that we got reversed. But one of the things I was curious on is like this event match quality. And I was like, okay, I see the number went down and it came back up. Like, where should this be? So that was one of my first questions was like, I don't know what's a good score. Sometimes you get graded. Is a 9 good? Is that an A, or is that actually, are we, curving that a little bit? Like, I don't know. Right. So that was the first question was like, what do the numbers actually mean and how good do they need to be? Do they need to be 10 out of 10 or can they be lower than that? What does that look like? So Brett, why don't you like go through that? Let's talk through like the main events that we would see: page view, add to cart, purchase, initiate checkout. Like, how do you think about those? What do the numbers look like? Is there a number that kind of raises a red flag for you? Or yeah, tell us more about those.
Yeah. So the first thing is EMQ stands for event match quality. So it's important to remember because that's what we were just talking about is it's a quantitative way for Meta to kind of tell you how confidently can we match this event, this action on your website to a user on our platform. That's the gist of it. So it's what data are we passing back to help Meta make those matches, which drives optimization, which obviously helps your ads performance and efficiency and all that good stuff. It's on a scale out of 10. I've never seen a 10 on any event with real data, so don't obsess about that to those listening. Like, I've never seen an actual real 10. The other thing I would say before we kind of dive into the details is EMQ's a little funny, funky. It's weighted. It can be gamed. There's a lot of elements to it. So I think what we can go through is like, what are the important things to focus on and to care about, and not dwell on like it's not a 10 or it's this score, but more like what we're sending back. So so the first thing is EMQ will vary. It always starts the lowest on like the highest funnel events. So when a user hits your website, and you get like a page view event, that first landing page view, you're going to get the lowest EMQ scores of your range there. And we see everything there from like a 4.5 to like low 6s, depending on what gets passed back.
So
So
for what it's worth, Hollow, I'll just run through my numbers and then we can
yeah,
use this as an example.
perfect.
7 on the dot, 7.0 page view, which seems high, which is
That's
great.
good.
So
I've got a
7.0.
6.3 pulled up, so you're winning.
And we can dive in a minute to a little bit of what's like fueling that
Yep.
and why. But yeah,
Sure. Yep.
that's a good score.
So page view 7.0 view content. So to your point, like as you kind of get through the funnel, right, to add to cart. So page view 7, view content 7.1, add to cart 7.2, purchase 9.0, or initiate checkout 8.5, purchase 9.0. So just to give an example, live example brand that we're spending, 7 figures a month on, there's a lot of events going through this. So not just a few. But yeah, keep going, Brad. Or Brett,
Yeah,
sorry.
and the reason for that is when someone hits your website, they haven't given you any information. They haven't submitted anything. You don't have any of that user match data to send back. There are some technical parameters that you can capture, like when they first hit. So um, Facebook has 2 parameters, an FBP and an FBC, which we'll dive in a little more because I think the FBC is a really important one and valuable to dive in a little more on in a second. But there's like your IP address. There's a bunch of things that you can pass when a user hits before they've submitted anything to you. That's what's going to fuel that page view score. Also, a lot of stores will like, if you have a user logged in, possibly that has an account that's logged in, you might have access to their email and their phone number, something right away when they hit the site. So those things all fuel that page view EMQ score right when someone hits. But they haven't made a transaction. They haven't submitted like their name or their email or anything like that. So we get those technical kind of parameters. Shopify also has one. There's a parameter called an external ID, which is just like a customer ID. Shopify assigns a unique one when a user hits your site and it carries through their whole session. So you can pass all those things when a user hits before they've made a transaction and sent you. So that's what fuels those like we see a lot of like 5s, low 6s. 7 is great. You must have some like logged in users. There's another thing to mention here is there's some data providers that also use like IP geolocation, and this gets a little in the weeds, but like they look at your IP address and they guess your city, state, and country and all that based on your IP, and they pass that information back. So sometimes we go in and audit and it's like a page view and we're getting state and country and zip code on 100% of events. How is that possible? Like we don't know that yet. That's usually like IP geolocation. And that's what I mean by like EMQ can be gamed a little bit. So when you see those numbers, and for anyone that wants to look, if you want to look at what your EM actually makes up your EMQ score, the main overall scores will be in your Events Manager Overview tab. But if you expand on any of the events and go into the event details, there's a little sub tab called Event Quality, and you can see like the rate of all these things being captured. That's just that they're being captured. It's not saying they're unique or authentic value. So I could put Brett Fish as the first and last name on every event on a site, and it would say I'm capturing first and last name 100% of the time, although that's not valuable to the platform, right? So it can be gained a little bit, but that's what's fueling those like upper funnel EMQ scores. The more data, to Zach's original point, of course, the more data you send, the better, as long as it's actual, real, authentic, relevant data and not just like, I'm just obsessed with trying to drive up my EMQ score, so I'm going to send a bunch of kind of BS back to Meta. That's not helping your efforts at all. Anyway, and then you get all the way down the funnel to a purchase. I make a purchase on the site. I'm probably submitting my name, my email address, my actual address, shipping address, and all that. So now we can pass all that additional information back in addition to what we had passed before. And that's what gets you up into the high 8s, low 9s. Typically for a purchase, which, let's be honest, purchase events probably the most important. It's what the majority of advertisers are optimizing toward. So the match rate's really critical. We see usually like high 8s to low 9s. Like 9.3 is usually like the highest I've seen it. High 8s, you're probably fine, like 8.6, 8.7. Anything below an 8, Jack, speaking to red flags, is something we would be like, we want to at least look at this and see why. Meta's official documentation is that a 6 is the minimum they recommend to actually use to optimize your ads on. But a purchase event with all the data that should be available there, you should be in the high 8s, low nines in that area.
So you're going on, you go through this, you're looking at this, your brand owner listening to this, and you're looking at the numbers. What are the things that you go in and would do to like some top things you'd go in and try to solve this to make these a little bit better for some folks, right? Or is it all over the map?
It's a little relative to each event, like what you could practically hope to capture and send with each event. I think you just have to be realistic about that. What we would do if like we were going to look through it is what are we receiving at each stage, and does that make sense? Like and it's there's a little bit of common sense, not even technical. It's like if someone's added something to their cart, do you have their email address? Probably not, unless they're logged in. So am I worried? If there's no email on an add to cart? No, but we should be getting their IP address. We should be getting other things. Two important things I think is a good time to mention. The two most important, highest priority match keys in Meta's whole system, and they have documentation on this, are the Facebook click ID, the FBC parameter, and the email, the user email. Those are the two most important things. If you can't send anything else, if you send those two parameters, and Facebook click ID is definitely like the top one, and I'll talk about that in just a second, but those are the two most important. So especially on a purchase event, I would really focus on those. I'd look at like, are we getting an email? We should probably have it on 100% of events. And then are we getting the Facebook click ID? Now, here's the caveat with the Facebook click ID, and this came up when I was talking to Zach. It's not going to be at 100 in your events manager. Events manager is every event your site is receiving, not just what's being driven by ads. So even if a user originates from an organic Google search, you're going to get a purchase event fire when they purchase on your site. The click ID, that FBC parameter, is only going to be present on sessions and purchases that came from a Meta ad on one of their entities. So a lot of times we'll go into a purchase and like FBC parameter will be like 27% of purchase events have the Facebook click ID. That's not a red flag. That's not a problem. What we always recommend is like, if you have the data, like compare that to generally what you think the volume of the proportion of your purchases are that come from Meta ads. So like if you think that 75% of all your purchases come from a Meta ad, but you're only at 20% click ID, maybe that's something to look at, because there should be more of those events then that have that click ID. But it's not a red flag to see that number lower than usual in Events Manager, or lower than 100, because it's only going to be from the events that came from Meta ads. And we're looking at all events.
So you said compared to kind of what you think Meta is driving. So it could be higher than that in the event that maybe you have a ton of organic traffic, but Meta ads are doing a solid job at capturing that and retargeting it with like a DPA or maybe some other stuff. But it might be lower than that if you have like a high AOV and the person took 30. Well, maybe you could tell me, it's like if they click on the ad and they went and researched and came back to it 2 weeks later after they saw something else, are they going to pass through? Is a Facebook click ID going to exist on that purchase event?
It's possible. It all comes down to the cookie expiration, because what happens is, and we won't get too technical in the weeds, but what happens is when a user clicks your ad on Facebook or Instagram, Meta appends a URL parameter to that link coming through to your website, kind of like a UTM that a lot of people are familiar with. And it's the FBC LID, is you can see it in the URL. That is a really important value, because what that says to Meta is, it's just a string value, but it says this user clicked this ad at this time and then went to your site. So it's super deterministic. So if you pass that back with your events, Meta can look at that FBC and be like, well, Brett Fish clicked this ad at this time at this, and then made a purchase on Zach's site 10 minutes after. We're definitely attributing that purchase. So it's really deterministic. But what happens is when you hit the site, if you have the Meta Pixel installed, it'll grab that URL parameter and store it as a cookie in the browser. And so it really just comes down to the cookie expiration, which a lot of times is like, I mean, your attribution in Ads Manager, a lot of people use like a 7-day click attribution, but the cookie expiration is usually around like 28 days. So that value, to your question, Brad, should still be in there if they come back. But, in an Ads Manager, if you're only using 7-day attribution, if it's past that, it won't attribute. But that click ID should still be valid as long as the cookie's valid.
Got it. Cool. And if you had to Google what deterministic meant when Brett said that word, like, you're not alone. So it's all good. I get it.
It's the most important. No, and I the reason, and Zach and I talked a little bit about this on our call, it is the most important parameter because it's Meta provided, right? It's not like I'm submitting an email and we hope the email that I submit on my order on the store matches my email that I'm registered with on Facebook and Instagram so we can match that up. That value is coming directly from Meta. They know who the user is, when they click the ad, what ad they clicked. So it's very, very deterministic. If you're going to pass one parameter, that's the one. And there's a lot of misunderstanding around it, but it is important. So but I always want to point out, just because it's not on 100% of your events, that's not a red flag or anything to freak out about. That's normal. But that is a really important one to make sure you're capturing and passing, especially if you happen to be an advertiser that's doing like CAPI only and not using the pixel. So you don't have that automatic mechanism of setting the cookie and all that. You want to make sure you can still manually capture that value and pass it with CAPI. You want to make sure you're doing that because that's a really important value to your optimization and ad success on the platform.
Is there anything else that you guys talked about on your call that you think you'd want to dig into, or do you want to switch over to the health and wellness total non-disaster?
I think
Yeah, I mean,
um,
that was mostly it, right? I think it was just like getting the understanding of how CAPI works. It's kind of like two channels of information, trying to match some of that to like, be duplicate information. Ideally, CAPI or server side data is even stronger to your point to give Meta even more data back than what you might miss, that the pixel might miss. So that clarity was helpful. The EMQ event match quality component was important too, because again, like without the context of like, is a 9 good for purchase? You kind of freak out and you're like, maybe this is why my ads aren't working. So I think that was just like peace of mind more than anything. FBC component of it too. Like we were looking across the multiple brands that we own and operate, and one of them was at like 48% FBC end purchase, and one was at like 63. And it was like, okay, that makes more sense on the 63 one because it's very impulse purchase related. Like I think more of our traffic is actually from Meta driving that purchase than even other channels, organic, email, other click based traffic. So to get the FBC tag to carry through makes a lot of sense. So again, I think for me it was more just making sure everything was in good standing, and that if there was something missing, that we could at least identify it. So, which I think is really like the best rationale of like these audits with Brett is like to get that peace of mind, right? Because otherwise you might just be thinking your ads are, working great when they might not be, or you're freaking out like I was thinking that that's the issue. So, Meta health and wellness, let's get into that.
just before we dive into that though is, Meta's one of the main growth engines and channels for most advertisers and brands. These same things kind of about EMQ, like Google has what they call enhanced conversions. TikTok has match rates, all the same kind of stuff. So this is more and more like across all major digital ad platforms is with like what Meta calls EMQ, but is passing back as much user data as possible so that these platforms can match website actions with their platform users. It's big across all channels. Obviously, with Meta, it's very like granular and broken down, and like you can really dive in and see it. But it is relevant and important on a lot of these ad channels, not just Meta. But Meta is like where most people focus and where it's like really easy to dive into your scores and all that. So for what it's worth.
Health and wellness. What's the business? What's going on? Everybody freaking out for no reason, or is it actually a problem?
No, it's a problem. There's a lot of people I know that would definitely tell you it's a problem. Feel free to ask any questions like you guys have on it, but I can give kind of the quick. We're kind of like accidentally sort of experts in this area, but I can give you the quick kind of backstory and framing. Does that sound good?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the real start of this is Meta's been hit with a lot of class action lawsuits about user data and privacy, and that becomes even more important and critical around industries like health and finance, where that data is very, obviously a lot of people have heard of HIPAA, health privacy data policies and things like that. It becomes even more sensitive and important around things like health and finance. So we started getting notices, I think, in December of 24, so this last year, and then things really started rolling out in January of this year. But so Meta had rolled out this process and setup in their system where they scan the website, the URL, where you're sending all of these great events that we've been talking about, like purchase events, things like that. When those come in, they scan that website with an automated system, and kind of like how the ad review process works and how they scan ad landing pages, similar but different and distinct. They scan in and look for any content or data that could be sensitive. So health and wellness related, financial related, things like that. Um, the original rollout that happened in January, they started at, I think, their highest priority level, which was anything that goes after a specific condition. So if you're selling a treatment for anxiety or cancer or something like very specific, they went after those advertisers first. And what happens is they scan the URL on the website and then they apply a category that's like a health and wellness category. If you're curious if you are in that category or might be in the events manager that we talked about in the settings, there's a section that says manage data source categories. And you can go in there and see if your domain has been categorized. But they rolled out a category that was health and wellness condition. And there, to your point, Brad, this is a big deal because the restriction that accompanied that in Events Manager was you lost your lower funnel events, most likely. The reason for that is those are all intent-based events, right? So anyone can accidentally click an ad, hit a website, but let's say I have athlete's foot, right? Gross. I see an ad. I'm like, best athlete's foot treatment, sweet. I go to the site, I add to cart, and I purchase. That's sending a pretty strong signal back to Meta that I have athlete's foot because I purchased a treatment, and that's what that site's about. So that's what they were trying to eliminate. So they eliminated everything below, lower in the funnel than a view content. So add to cart, initiate checkout, all the ad payment method purchase, all that stuff went away. So that's a huge deal because 90% of advertisers are optimizing for purchase. You lose that event, your performance is going to pretty much start degrading immediately, which is what we saw. So, there were some options that came up. There were options on X that were talked a lot about, like using custom events. Ironically, Meta originally said, don't do that. They produced documentation that said, don't do that. But now there's like dozens of firsthand accounts of Meta reps actually telling advertisers, use custom events and just keep advertising. But that was the solution then was, use an event that in all practical purposes is a purchase event, but call it something else. Call it success or call it, whatever. And we'll pass that back. Only those standard events like purchase are blocked. So you can keep using these custom events. And that was a solution for a while that worked. I'd say it was probably about, like, just my take was about 60% successful. We heard some that it didn't work for, but some it did work for. And then in June, they introduced a new wrinkle, and they introduced a new categorization that was health and wellness other, which is a lot more gray area and like generalistic, but it's essentially any business that's like, or advertiser that's tangential to health and wellness. So not even a condition, but it can be all sorts of things that are related to health and wellness. And you get hit with this health and wellness other categorization. And the restriction is that you get put into what's called core setup. You don't lose your bottom of funnel events necessarily, but they put you into core setup. Core setup, I've seen some stuff on Twitter from some people like, oh, core setup will destroy your ad account. I don't totally agree with that on a technical level because core setup was around before health and wellness. They've used it in like other industries like finance. It's just a way to close some data loopholes so that as advertisers, we can't pass sensitive data back in like URL parameters like UTMs or in event data. So I can't add a custom parameter to my purchase event that's like credit score, right? They block that because they're like, you're in finance, you can't send that stuff. So it's a way to close data loopholes. What's been interesting though is, and this is from talking to dozens and dozens of advertisers, it seems though, however, when that categorization is applied to the data set, that there is some negative impact on the ad account. One client referred to it as a mysterious force, which is, I think, is about as specific as we can be. Meta has not produced any like documentation or comms on this, but once we saw it across dozens and dozens of accounts, you're like, okay, this isn't just a one-off. This is a trend. This is a thing where once that health and wellness categorization hits the data set and you're put into core setup, we've seen like spend dropping, conversion rate dropping, CPA like going up, like negative impact on the ad account. And so all we're left to sort of deduce from that is once you get categorized, there is a negative impact on your ad account. And a lot of advertisers have been struggling with that. So to your point, Brad, like I know that was like a long-winded backstory, but it's a very real thing. And there's a lot of really high-level operators that I respect, and I know they know their stuff, where they're like, nothing else changed. This happened, and it's been like a decline since then and immediately. So it's definitely a real thing. It's impacted a lot of advertisers. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of clarity and comms around like who qualifies or doesn't. The only real option you have is there's a manual review button that you can be like request review, and then you sit there like this and hope that that works. And then if it comes back and is like your SOL, that's it. And so
Yeah,
with Meta side,
it's
there are some
it's
options,
been
but that's really all you can do.
no great options. I mean, since I've been running andysdickpills.com, it's been tough for us. Honestly, though, there's
You're
no
sending a lot of your own information back to Meta.
yeah, there doesn't seem to be a great way to navigate this, which is one of the most depressing things that I tell. Like, we had a rash of people that joined off of a blog post, that we still regularly have people that are affected by this. And I'm like, there's really not anything magical I can tell you to do. Those that approach you, Brett, is it similar? Like you said, are there anything that they can do? I mean, you can obviously eliminate claims from your landing pages, that kind of thing, but not anything technically.
There are options. There are solutions that I won't necessarily go into detail on the podcast. One of those 387 listeners might be an engineer at Meta, and I don't want them coming for me. But there are a couple things we can do that we've helped some advertisers put in place to deal with that. If anyone that's listening is interested, just reach out. My email is just Brett, BRETT at taghero.io, or send a message to our website. But just reach out and like we can talk through like what we would want to look at is exactly what are you seeing, like what restrictions do you have, what are you facing, and then we could talk about what are some potential solutions. There are some things that can be done. Candidly, there's nothing that the only things you can do that comply with terms, Meta's terms, are you use your like good old view content event for optimization, which isn't ideal, or you try to scrub your site and submit for a review. But like we've had clients be like, even if we could do that, like especially in medical, they're like, it's going to take us almost like a year between generating all the new copy, running it through legal approvals, like getting it up on the site and redesign. Like it's just going to take forever. So there's not a lot of good options. And candidly, we've seen a really low success rate on those reviews. The ones we've heard about that are successful usually have aggressive reps at Meta inside to help push that stuff through. But we see a really low rate on those. We have seen some successful, but overall low rate. So outside of those things, there are a couple technical things that we might be able to do to help, but it really depends on your situation and what you're seeing and dealing with. And then maybe there's some ways we can help. But it's tough for everyone because a lot of these advertisers, we have a client and a friend who sells bath bombs, and they were categorized, and he's just like, WTF, right? Like we sell bath bombs. Like, is this really health and wellness? And it's tough. And they were having, some pretty significant negative impact on their ad account. So it has really impacted a lot of advertisers. And it's one of those things that's just curveball, right? And like very frustrating for a lot of them.
Yeah. I mean, I was quoted in an Investor Business Daily article that I got interviewed for about this, that I think it's fundamentally unfair that some people can like hound a rep and can like get basically, oh yeah, no worries. And then there's all these other people that exist in the world that are like running completely legitimate companies that don't have the same level. It's just unfair.
And there's always the golden rule with that too, right? If you spend enough gold, you can break the rules. So like there's elements of that too always.
Yeah. Guys, anything else?
I have maybe this is like too in the weeds, maybe this is a topic for another discussion, but have you seen anything work well related to not optimizing for purchase, like you set up? So you mentioned like the new customer event, but that's still kind of related to purchase. But I know there's a bunch of like quiz funnel completions you could try. I know Cody from Jones Road has talked about other mid funnel events that he's testing. He's seen some success with. He specifically mentioned they had a great podcast with Eric. I don't know how to say his last name, Seifert maybe. And they kind of talked about this idea of signal engineering. Something that Cody said that was really interesting, and I think Eric said on the podcast that you should try, is like adding in some friction if you're going to try a mid funnel event. Like, hey, send people to a landing page, but don't fire the view content on the landing page, but optimize for view content, which is the next page after that. So somebody has to go through the landing page and then get to the product page. Have you seen any like crazy setups that have actually been meaningful? Or is this everybody's just guessing and seeing if it works?
No, I mean, and at the end of the day, it's hard because I'd say like test it, and every account is so different that like it's rare that blanket advice just works for everybody. and the other thing I'd just be upfront about is we don't always get the back end like media buying insight and results like after we've worked on stuff or put things in. They don't come back to us necessarily and be like, we do definitely hear on some things like this worked versus not, but like I think some of that stuff is definitely worth testing. I think especially for large brands like a Jones Road, high spend, right? I think you get to a certain point where you can almost tap out like the purchase event optimization. Because if you think about it, what Meta's really doing is saying, well, we were talking about earlier with the MQ, Brad, you go on Jones Road, you get, some exfoliant, whatever it is. And they're like, cool, Brad bought this. Let's go find more Brads. Well, you get to the point where that process, you start like with huge daily spends and stuff, you start to tap that out. So I've definitely heard of large brands with large spends like over time, especially where it's like we've been running ads for years, we're spending $100,000 a day or whatever, and it's like you get to the point where maybe introducing some upper funnel events just will sort of tweak and shock the system a little bit and go after a different pool and sort of cohort of users on the platform and bring them in. So I think like optimizing for that stuff is definitely worth a test, like optimizing for upper funnel events. And then, yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, what is a purchase event to Meta, right? It's an intent. It's this user converted on the site, so we want to go find more of them. So I think in that same light, if you want to optimize for a quiz completion, that's pretty high intent. Someone clicked your ad, went to a site, went through a whole quiz process and submitted some info. That's pretty high intent. Let's go after other people who are going to complete the quiz. Because at the end of the day, worst case scenario, maybe they're not converting immediately, but you are getting like they're getting pixeled when they hit your site for retargeting, or you're getting their email maybe with the quiz for email marketing and retention. There's some other things positives that can come out of it too, other than just a pure like purchase transaction conversion. So I think it's definitely worth testing that stuff. One just like anecdotal thing we saw a long time ago when I was running more on my agency, we had a client that was very lead based. They produced tons of lead magnets, like recipes and things like that. And initially we were optimizing for the lead event, right? Which was great. We got tons of leads and like we put these lead magnets out and got a lot of leads. But when we did a cohort analysis afterward, we were getting a lot of leads and they might have been converting other ways, but we weren't getting actually a ton of like purchase conversions at the end of it, like commensurate with the lead volume. So we ran a test, and instead of optimizing for leads, we actually optimized for purchases, so that those ads with those lead magnets were actually shown to people who were more like our purchasers and not people who were just more likely to complete a lead. And it takes a little bit of work outside of just like pure in-platform metrics. But when we looked at the cohort analysis on the back end, that group, even though it was a lead magnet and they're just down the purchase value of that cohort was much higher than the lead event optimization. So I definitely think there's an element of like signal engineering and kind of like what you want. I would still tell most advertisers optimize for what you want, which is a purchase. But I think if you get to certain size and scale, or you want to try other intent-based things like quizzes, or the thing with like the view content after a landing page to add a little more friction, what that does is that makes that view content event have a little more intent to it because you had to take an extra step. I know the guys at Obvi at one point were working on this too, because like they were like, how much signal can we send the minute they hit the website? So we're capturing as much as possible. Like there's a couple different ways to look at that, but especially the stuff on the higher intent stuff like quizzes, I think fire an event when you complete a quiz, optimize toward that and see what that does. Maybe take some winning ads that are successful and try that and see how the results compare. I think a lot of that is definitely worth testing in accounts for sure.
Yeah. And we saw the same thing with lead optimization for what it's worth with people who do like early access to new product launches and things like that. And then that's probably ultimately also why Meta changed the way that you can optimize for a conversion-based lead in more recently, where you can connect your CRM and actually tell them, okay, people are actually progressing down the funnel, and then you can optimize for those things better. Because optimizing for lead might just get you a bunch of shit leads if you don't add some friction there. So that's a great point.
Yep.
Cool.
Brett, thank you for joining us, and
My
we
pleasure.
appreciate it. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to hit up Tag Hero or email me, Andrew@foxwelldigital.com. I've had 5 people do that, so wow, big numbers. And everybody,
Was one of them.
Yeah, everybody have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Homestead's email and SMS service. Honestly, we've done an episode with Jacob from Homestead. He's the man.
best.
And he's got to be probably one of the smartest email and retention operators
Easily.
like on the agency side,
Easily.
hands down. I look forward to seeing like the tweets that he puts out basically every single month with like a recap of the designs. And as amazing as the designs themselves are, it's the actual like tactical behind the scenes work where he just like knows what he's doing. And the team at home said like really know what they're doing on email and SMS. Probably, if not the number one, very close to competing for number one retention agency in the DTC space. So just killing it.
Yeah, absolutely agree. If you are looking at your emails and you're like, these are terrible, and you can optimize the flows and you can do SMS better, you got to look at the Homestead team. So check them out, reach out, and they can definitely help make your entire email and retention and SMS program so much better. And I'm not just saying that. We've all seen the work. I actually had a member who sat down with Jacob at the founder meetup that we had, and he came over to me and said, I just talked to him for 10 minutes, and literally he's revolutionized my entire email department. So agencies are modeling themselves off of what Jacob is giving them for advice. So anyway, onwards to hopefully working with them. The only way that we grow this podcast is by you sharing it with your friends. Honestly, like reviews kind of don't really mean anything too much anymore. They're really meaningful, but they don't do a lot for the growth of the podcast. And so sharing YouTube links, sharing Spotify links, sharing Apple, whatever we call it under the podcast app now, anything you can share, the better we're going to be. Guys, anything else you want to say on this?
Yeah, please go check us out on YouTube. Rack up those views for us. We'd love to see it. And then subscribe. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube as well.
And I relentlessly refresh the YouTube comments because it dictates my mental health for the day. So please say something nice about all of us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you for listening, honestly.